Hey, so this year I really wanted to make my own Thanksgiving dress. I feel like I've been progressively getting better at my sewing, and so I really wanted to try a more complicated design, and this is what I ended up with. And so today I really wanted to show you guys the process, how I got to this point, and hopefully that's going to be enjoyable to you guys. After going through all of my patterns, I think I've landed on this one. I really like the whole denim look, but I'm not a huge fan of denim. But I have this really cool fabric that I picked up the other day that I've really been excited to use. So I'm gonna check and see if I have enough. If I do, this is happening. I'm done copying the pattern, and somehow this is both my favorite and least favorite thing to do, and I don't know how that's possible. I really want to take my time with this one because I feel like I always rush through my clothes, and that's not a good thing to do. So I'm just gonna take a breath, slow down, and I want to try and make something like really, really good. 3 hours later, I have all of my pieces cut, and what I was afraid of happened. I didn't have enough of this material to do the whole dress, but I think that's gonna work out because the same time I bought this fabric, I bought this fabric, which I think is very complementary. So I'm gonna do the sleeves and the collar and the pockets in this fabric, and I think that's gonna add like a nice accent. So we're gonna find out how that turns out. The very first thing I did was stay stitch the neckline, and what this does is keep the neck from stretching out and moving around as you're working with your fabric. As I was sewing my stay stitching, for whatever reason, this stupid thing right here, the needle, it like popped out of balance. Like it's supposed to be in the center, and it just went whoop, and now it's over here and I don't know why. I hate this sewing machine. Alright, for anyone needing to know, in case I'm not the only one, this guy right here is going to be your side-to-side adjuster, and I did have to pull a little screw out of the side in order to adjust this. So after that drama was over, I sewed in the front panel darts, and I feel like this was both decorative, but it also helps with the boob area to help fit better. Next, I prepared the front panel pocket, pinned it to the front left piece, and sewed that into place. I folded and pinned the back pleat, and this is that beautiful pleat that you see in a lot of dress shirts. After that was pinned, I then pinned the yoke to the back piece and sewed those two together. And at this point, I will point out that I was finishing my seams. So after they were sewed into place, I would trim them down to about 1/4 inch and then do a zigzag stitch. And I'm telling you guys that now because I'm not going to show you again anywhere else in this video, but just know that that was how I was finishing my seams. I next connected the two front panel pieces to the yoke at the shoulders. And next came the side pockets, which was a bit intimidating at first, but ended up being a super easy thing. So each pocket was 2 pieces. So I sewed a piece to the front panel, a piece to the back panel, and then in one long stitch, I connected both the back panel and the front panel together at the sides, following along the curve of that pocket. And of course, since I didn't mention this earlier, you always want to be pressing your seams. Always, always, always. It helps the seams sit better, it makes your garment look more crisp and professional, and I learned that the hard way because some of my beginning work looks pretty dumpy. At this point, I did a sort of half finish on the 2 front panels, so I pressed the raw edges in at the fold line, which was included in the pattern, and I did that twice and sewed them to about 8 inches at the bottom. And then came what I believe to be the most difficult part, and that was the collar, because it's very precise and very intricate. I started by ironing on the fusible interface to the collar and the neckband piece. And what that does is add structure to it. So I'm going to try and explain this as best as I can, but it is a little complicated. So I started by pinning the neckband to the garment, and basically clipping the raw edge as necessary so it would all kind of fit together smoothly. And then I sewed that into place. Then I sewed together the collar pieces, so the one with the fusible interfacing and then the one without, leaving one end open so that I could turn it inside out. I then pressed and top stitched it. I then sewed the collar to the neckband piece that was already attached to the garment. And then using that remaining neckband piece, the one without the fusible interfacing, I sewed that on the raw edge to finish everything up. I know that probably doesn't make sense, but that's the best way I know how to explain it without like really getting into it. Finally, I got to the sleeves, and this was actually what I was most afraid of because I've never really worked with easement much, so it was a learning process. But before I got to the easement stitching, I first had to add in some of the finer details. So the first thing was to add the wrist slit. So I cut along the mark that was included in the pattern and finish those edges with a continuous lap, which is basically just a small piece of fabric that you sew the entire length of the slit. So each side of the slit is going to get that fabric. Next, I added in soft pleats, which were placed at the wrist. So I just pinned and basted those in place. Now, because this pattern gave the option to have rolled up sleeves, that was my next step. So I finished those sleeve tabs and stitched those to the inside of the sleeves. And I feel like this was just poor design because, in my opinion, the only way you're ever going to be able to wear this garment is with the sleeves rolled up, because otherwise it's just really tacky. Because you can see the stitch marks on the outside of the sleeve, and you also have to put the button that tab fastens to. So when your sleeve's down, you see all of that, and I think it personally looks really ugly. So if I were to make this particular pattern again, I probably either wouldn't include that at all, or I would maybe add like an inner lining to the sleeve, which would make it more bulky, but at least then I would have like a structure to sew that stuff to without it showing on that outside panel. And finally, we got to the easement. So I ended up looking up a really good tutorial. The woman is an absolute goofball, but her video helped me a lot. So I'm gonna put a link to her video down in my description. So following her directions, I added the easement to my sleeve caps and then sewed those sleeves into a cylindrical shape. And before I could sew them to the garment themselves, I still had to add the cuffs. So I prepared the cuffs, which included ironing on the fusible interfacing, sewing the two pieces together, turning it inside out. And there were, of course, finer details that I could go into, but I feel like it would just make this video too complicated, and that's not what I'm trying to make this. With the cuffs prepared, I then pinned and sewed them to the sleeves, which took a little bit of finessing because the cuffs were slightly smaller than the sleeves. And then finally, with the sleeves done, I was able to then pin them to the garment and then sew them into place, which I thought was so cool. And I love watching it all come together and understanding why those small details like easement stitching and stay stitching and all of that is so important. And then all that was left was the finishing details. So I made up the waist tie. I finished up the bottom of the garment, as well as that remaining 8 inches on the front panel. Using a button guide that was included in the pattern, I added in all of the buttonholes on the right side panel, and then hand sewed all of the buttons on. So the buttons that went on the front left panel, the buttons on each sleeve, and then the buttons on each cuff. And then this was the final garment. I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. This was the most complicated piece that I've ever made. I feel like I learned a lot from this pattern. It forced me to look up a lot of things and try things that at first didn't really make sense. And then, like I said earlier, just watching it all come together and then understanding the importance of these small steps. You really can't skip them. They're important. So I'm really happy to see how well the two fabrics work together. I was worried when I wasn't able to get it all in one, but it worked out. And I feel like it has like a really funky 70s vibe to it, which I'm absolutely loving. And the ombre buttons just tie it all together. I love this. All right, guys, but that was all I had to share with you today. I really hope you enjoyed going on this sewing adventure with me. I'm so excited to make bigger and grander things. I would love to get to the point where I can make huge, gorgeous ball gowns and like fitted dress pants. I love sewing because you have the ability to fit clothing to your size. You don't have to be a slave to the market standard sizing that plagues everybody. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, I really hope you'll leave me a thumbs up. I love seeing those. If you're new here and you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel because I would love to see this channel grow. I want it to continue to grow as I grow. That would be wonderful. And all that being said, guys, I will see you in the next video. Bye.